Welcome to SportsBeat KC, the Kansas City Star's daily sports podcast. It's Thursday, December 1st, and I'm Blair Kirchhoff. Do the Chiefs have a Cincinnati Bengals problem? They did last year when the Bengals swept the Chiefs, with the second loss coming in the AFC title game at Arrowhead. The teams meet on Sunday in Cincinnati, and the Chiefs have plenty of emotional advantages. But if they don't find a way to win, well, what will we think about a rematch in the playoffs? We discuss that and more topics on today's SportsBeat KC with columnist Vahe Gregorian and beat writers Jesse Newell and Herbie Teope. The show started as a SportsBeat Live broadcast. Let's get started. Hey, good morning from chilly Kansas City. Welcome to SportsBeat Live, our weekly conversation about the Kansas City Chiefs with the folks in the media who know them best and with you. So send us your questions and comments, and we'll talk Chiefs with you guys. We've got Vahe Gregorian, Jesse Newell, and Herbie Teope here today. Guys, how we doing? Everybody good?
Just great.
Hearing no objection, we will continue on. So Herbie, because injuries might play a role here this weekend, get us started with the injury report and who's back and who is not back for the Chiefs game against Cincinnati on Sunday.
Yeah, let's start off with first off who's back. Juan Thornhill, who did not play in Week 12 with the calf injury, he put in a full practice Wednesday, so that's a good sign that he's trending up. The same thing with left guard Joe Thuney, who did not play with an ankle injury. He put in a full practice Wednesday, so that's absolutely a good sign. Last week, they went to Nick Allegretti, who actually held his own against Aaron Donald. So getting those two pieces back, though, it certainly bodes well for the Chiefs leading into Sunday's showdown with the Cincinnati Bengals. As for the players who did not practice Wednesday, there were three of them. Kadarius Toney is probably the biggest one. Obviously, he's still dealing with the hamstring injury. The Chiefs are not going to push him to come back sooner than later. They're going to take their time with that. Juju Smith-Schuster didn't practice with an illness, and Jerick McKinnon, who's been dealing with all kinds of injuries on the injury report, shoulder, hip, whatever. He's dealing with a hamstring injury now, and he did not practice Wednesday as well. So that, right now, those are the three big names, but the two names coming back is good news.
Yeah, I want to emphasize Allegretti's game. It looked like he really, as you said, Herbie, really did hold his own in place of Joe Thuney, and that's for the Chiefs to have that kind of depth at offensive line, pretty good thing for Andy Reid's team.
I'll tend to agree. I mean, you got to remember that first series there, it looked like Aaron Donald was on his way to have himself some kind of a game there. He recorded 2 tackles and a quarterback hit on the Chiefs' first series. But, we find out yesterday or Wednesday, we find out that Aaron Donald suffered a high ankle sprain in that first quarter.
Oh.
But the fact that they were still able to negate Aaron Donald after that first series is pretty good. You got to give credit to Creed Humphrey, Trey Smith, and, of course, Allegretti.
Okay, Cincinnati Bengals are the opponent in the Queen City on Sunday, late afternoon slot. So I got to tell you guys, Patrick Mahomes been the starting quarterback since 2018, actually started the final game of the 2017 season. And he's had his good games, and he's had a few bad games in his career. But until last year's AFC Championship game, I never assigned blame for a loss to Patrick Mahomes. Chiefs lost games, of course, but you could find reasons why they lost outside of the quarterback position. It was the defense, drop balls, fumbles, didn't manage the game well from a coaching standpoint. I never, you look at the Super Bowl loss to the Tampa Bay Bucks, and it was a lopsided loss, but Mahomes was almost heroic in that game, scrambling for his life. And, the AFC Championship game loss to the Patriots in Mahomes' first year as a starter, never got the ball in overtime, and he brought him back in the second half and then had the miraculous drive just to get the field goal to go into overtime. So I just kind of absolved him from any kind of blame, which is why last year's AFC Championship game kind of shook me a little bit. the way he played in the second half, and I know we talked about it this week, but Vahe, I wanted to talk to you about this. It was just different, and it kind of I think maybe scarred Chiefs fans a little bit to see him have the half that he did for the Chiefs to lose the big lead and fall to the Bengals. And I bring all this up because, and I want to get Jesse's thoughts too later, but where these two teams are this year, and if there's if there's any reason to believe that we could see something similar this time. But just what was it like? Because I did miss the game. I wasn't there, but just sitting in the press box and watching the Chiefs fall apart in the second half of that title game last year.
Well, there was sure a lot going on. I agree with your premise about, any other time they've lost games with Patrick, you could typically absolve him. But this was such a crazy different second half, starting with the end of the first half, of course, with that sort of ill-played final sequence that could have been a knockout blow. For Seinfeld fans, it could have been the death blow. And it wasn't. And then, look, Patrick threw 2 interceptions after halftime. I always think about the back-to-back sacks down near the goal line, that the time management on that sequence. We've spoken with him a little bit about it, but we've also spoken with Andy Reid a little bit about it. And you guys were there when we were in Andy Reid's dorm room talking in late camp in St. Joe, talking a little bit about the residual effect of the Bengals game. And look, there's plenty of X's and O's stuff, but as far as the psychological mumbo jumbo, I think that's a factor. And Andy used terms like that they didn't keep an edge. They and Patrick, when I asked him about it after the game on Sunday, talked about they thought they were going to coast through the second half. And how that plays out in real time is another matter, right? But there's a mentality we're talking about here. And I think that's what's kind of interesting going into this game, especially with looks like a little woofing going back and forth between each team here. So, in the pantheon of Mahomes losses, or losses with Mahomes, I should say, that's a singular game. And what also stands out, and you guys have all been here longer than I have, but I think Sam McDowell would tell you he thought that was, of all the crushing Chiefs postseason playoff losses, the entire catalog, that this one is as high up there as any because of the fact that we thought the Chiefs were past that. I think with that game, Andy Reid became the only coach to have leads of 18 points or more, lose multiple games of leads of 18 points or more in the postseason. It's some stat like that. So there's a lot there. I kind of rambled, but that's how I roll.
We like rambling, and you're right. The three. He's the only coach to have 3 playoff losses after holding the leads of 18 or more. And that was the first one, though, with Patrick Mahomes. The other 2 came with Alex Smith at quarterback. So, Jesse, you were at the game, and you had just started covering the Chiefs. It must have been, you're sitting there watching the Chiefs with a 21-3 lead in the late in the first half. Vahe alluded to a couple of plays. First, the not scoring the touchdown or passing up the field goal and not scoring the touchdown at the end of the first half with the ill-fated play, pass to Tyreek Hill, and he couldn't get in the end zone. But also, Joe Mixon with the long touchdown. I think it was a short reception, and maybe it was a run. I can't remember, but it was about 40 yards to kind of give the Bengals life. And then they continued that life with keeping the Chiefs out of the end zone just before halftime. And I thought in a critical sequence, the Chiefs got the ball to start the second half, and Mahomes went incomplete to Travis Kelce and Tyreek Hill and gave the ball right back to the Bengals. So I just had a sinking feeling at that point, and my feelings were true as it turned out. But first of all, Jesse, what were your thoughts as that game was unfolding, and how much should Chiefs fans think that there's it could be a motivating factor for them on Sunday?
Yeah, I remember doing this SportsBeat Live after the game, and the Chiefs were up 21-3, and I said if you'd have given me 1 million reasons for why the Chiefs might lose to the Bengals after being up 21-3, bottom 5 on the list would have been that Patrick Mahomes fell apart. And that's what happened. I mean, there's been some discussion this week about it. Patrick Mahomes was asked about it yesterday at the press conference, sort of like, do you have guardrails now? Are there things where you're sort of losing your fundamentals or your mind, for lack of a better term, where he obviously was just off mentally in that second half, and he couldn't get it back on track. And so part of what Andy Reid talks about so much is whatever you experience, you learn from, you try to learn from. And so I think this is an experience maybe more than maybe any other in Patrick Mahomes' career that he's tried to learn from and tried to make sure that sort of thing doesn't repeat itself, because again, giving the Chiefs that sort of lead and to have them fall apart in the second half like they did because their quarterback was not himself, I think that was obviously a troubling sign of something that they do not want to repeat in the future, especially when the quarterback you have is obviously one of the best to ever play the position. So that kind of sticks out to me from that previous one. And is there motivation? Absolutely. I mean, usually the Chiefs are pretty quiet about this sort of stuff, and they were not quiet about it yesterday. I mean, they have been circling this one on the calendar. This is one they've been looking forward to. They're ready to get back at the Bengals, and that can play both ways. I mean, we've seen some of the chatter that Vahe alluded to online where guys are kind of going back and forth with each other, but this will be a fascinating matchup. And with the Chiefs schedule the way it is the rest of the way, maybe one of the only fascinating matchups left here in the regular season, but this has huge ramifications. I was looking at 538. The Chiefs win 81% to get the number 1 seed. If they lose, 43% to get the number 1 seed. So take care of business here, and you really have your destiny in your own hands moving forward. And the Chiefs can kind of put a lock on this AFC and getting that all important bye. So this is a really big game in every single way you can make it possible. But that vengeance factor, that revenge factor, that Patrick Mahomes wanting to show that he can be better against that team factor. And we've seen so many times when he counts on his fingers, all those sorts of things. It feels like one of those sorts of games where that sort of thing might be possible.
You know what's funny about it all, though? You reminded me of this, Jesse. Of course, the Chiefs' only other loss in the last 2 months last season was at the Bengals with a second half collapse, which you would have thought would have informed their mindset going into this game. So I don't know. I don't know if we think the Bengals are kryptonite or anything, but it will really be interesting. Every element you just described is going to be really interesting to track in this game.
This is by record, Herbie. Am I right that this is the toughest opponent that the Chiefs have left, or the team with the best record that the Chiefs have remaining on the schedule?
Yeah, you get through the Bengals, and it's almost, when you look at obviously anything can and will happen on an NFL Sunday, but you get through the Bengals, you got the Broncos, you got the Texans, the Seahawks. I mean, the Broncos twice, and then you close out the season with the Raiders. So, yeah, this is a game they absolutely cannot lose, especially with first-round seeding, first-round bye implications for the postseason on the line, and games that you should win to close out the stretch on a high note.
The Chiefs already have the worst schedule in the NFL left, and that's with the Bengals. So if you get by the Bengals game, then it becomes like the worst by far. So yeah, this is a huge game for the Chiefs, and they obviously can take their foot off the throttle a little bit if they win this game, because it's just what it is. I mean, Denver's not good, and Seattle's better than we thought, but still not great. And Texans are terrible, and the Raiders have kind of fallen apart. So yeah, this is a really, really. I mean, you just can explain it every single way. This is a really important game for the Chiefs, whether you want to talk about motivation, standings, bye, the rest of the schedule. It's the biggest game of the year left until the playoffs start.
So the 538 figures, Jesse, that you referenced, with the Chiefs' chances of being reduced, of being the number 1 overall seed, going from 80-something to 40-something, if the Chiefs lose, they'll still have a game lead on the Bengals. I would think that would be a Buffalo thing. If Chiefs would be tied, if assuming Buffalo, I don't know who Buffalo plays this. Oh, they play the Patriots, I believe, in primetime. And so the Chiefs, what they can't do is be tied with Buffalo. And that's where that to me Buffalo would be the one that would really benefit from a Chiefs loss this weekend.
Absolutely. Yeah, they would be tied then. As you said, the Chiefs would not have the tiebreaker based off the head-to-head earlier this season. So just plug that Chiefs loss in. The Chiefs would be 44% to get the first round bye. Bills would be at 30%. And then Dolphins start to be sprinkled in there at 12%. Bengals on the outside looking in at 8%. But again, they would have the all-important tiebreaker against the Chiefs. So that's kind of what you would be starting to look at with that otherwise, again, if the Chiefs win, then they really would almost have this thing not on ice completely, but looking really good going down the stretch, especially with the schedule that they have.
We heard from Chris Jones this week. I thought was had some interesting comments about about the Bengals. We spent a lot of time talking about the game Patrick Mahomes had. Chris Jones had a couple of sack opportunities in the second half of the AFC title game a year ago, and could not bring Joe Burrow down, and that had to stay with. It sounds like it stayed with Chris Jones during the offseason, and if Patrick Mahomes is motivated to beat this Bengals team, Chris Jones has to be equally motivated. Don't you think, Vahe, that letting Burrow off the hook a couple times as he did last year?
Yeah, and look, that stood out in a few ways. If I have these numbers right, this is off the top of my head, but I think this is right. I believe Burrow was sacked 9 times the week before and 7 in the Super Bowl and just once by the Chiefs. And I was on assignment elsewhere the last day or so, but so I didn't know exactly what Chris said this week. But I do remember in the offseason, Sam McDowell asking Chris not about the Bengals game, asking him about last season and what he'd taken from last season. And the first thing Chris talked about was I don't know if he used the term whiffing, but missing a couple sack opportunities. And so that was exactly at the top of his mind, even in a broader context. So I'm sure in the micro context of this game, this moment, what everybody could have done. We did make those points about Patrick earlier, but if 7 other guys make one more play, then it's still a different result. So anyway, yeah. And Chris, I'll be interested to see how that plays out and whatever annex might be part of this. One quick thing on Chris. I don't know if this is true every game. I've only noticed it a time or two, but the time a couple of games ago, I was like just looking at him going across the offensive line, shaking people's hands before the start of the game. And then, of course, trash talking with the best of them. It's just kind of interesting dynamic to me that once the game starts, everything's on, and then you go back to being a person.
I saw that in the Buffalo game, before the Buffalo game. And, of course, when he goes over and shakes Mitch Moore's hand, you understand that. They were former teammates. But he didn't stop with Mitch. He went up and down the offensive line, either fist bumping or shaking hands. And we need to ask him about that. That's kind of, I'm not surprised. If you had to pick a chief who would identify a chief that would be most likely to do that, yeah. It's Chris Jones, right?
And Chris was mic'd up for that Buffalo game, and there were some really nice exchanges with Chris and Mitch, tender and sincere. But anyway, I digress. I think Chris will be up for this game.
I think he will be too. He's having certainly a Pro Bowl, I would say an All-Pro, and even in the conversation for Defensive Player of the Year type of season. And a big game against the best opponent remaining on the Chiefs' schedule, I think, would help him in those in that realm to help solidify some postseason honors, and then we'll see what happens contract wise with him after that. Jesse, how do these teams stack up? The Chiefs are certainly different because of no Tyreek Hill. But they're still the NFL's top passing team in terms of yards, and they're still top scoring team. And the Bengals, even though their record is they're 2 games below the Chiefs, they lost, I think, 2 of their first 3, and they took the usual loss to Cleveland. They seem to have a Cleveland problem. They basically beaten everybody else and picked up a terrific victory last weekend, winning at Tennessee, stopping Derrick Henry, and they're getting Jamar Chase back this week, who they won games without him. How do you just measure up the Bengals versus the Chiefs?
Yeah, it's fascinating. I actually just got done talking about this 810 Sports Radio, kind of judging and gauging these 2 teams. I think the Vegas line opened at 2.5-point favorite. The Chiefs are at Cincinnati. But it kind of is an interesting thought question of whether you think the Chiefs are better this year than they were a year ago, and whether you think the Bengals are better than they were a year ago. And I looked up at the 538 has kind of like a program rating sort of thing where you can look at every week by week where a team was at a certain point. And it was kind of fascinating to look at that because, we know the Bengals, they made the Super Bowl, they made their run, obviously came pretty close to winning the Super Bowl last year and won a bunch of close games in a row. Actually, right now, that rating system, the ELO rating system, is showing the Bengals being better right now at this moment than they were at the end of last season. So that makes some sense when you look at the Vegas line. Chiefs, fascinatingly, I guess I would throw it back at you guys. Would you think that they would be better or worse or about the same as a year ago? I'll give you a couple seconds to think about that. But the ELO rating actually was very, very similar. One of them was 17-10. One of them was 17-14. So this Chiefs team is almost exactly where it was a year ago, which I think you can actually see as a pretty positive sign for the Chiefs, given that they traded away a future Hall of Fame wide receiver and got back a bunch of rookies who now are starting to develop and come into their own. But so as far as these two teams go, I would say that the Bengals are a little bit better actually than they were a year ago. They had some close game luck and, won every close game down the stretch, which got them the Super Bowl. Early this season, lost some close games, so had some of the bad luck, but now have been progressing on and look better than they were then. I would say the Chiefs, to their credit, are about as good as they were a year ago, and that makes up the line that we're looking at right now. But I think one big storyline I'm fascinated in is we talk about the young players of the Chiefs. Where are most of the young players populated? It's in the secondary. And where have the Chiefs really struggled to defend teams so far this year? It's when they have a number one receiver. And so Devontae Adams went off. Keenan Allen had a huge catch. I mean, when you look at kind of break up the schedule as when the Chiefs defense has played well and hasn't played well, you're looking at teams that had true number one receivers and teams that really didn't when they faced the Chiefs. So the Chiefs haven't had Trent McDuffie this whole season, so he should play a major factor. Joshua Williams played every defensive snap last week, so he's been a guy that's come on. But I'm very fascinated to see that matchup play out, and we've seen some Jamar Chase Twitter comments here recently responding to somewhat the Chiefs said in the locker room yesterday. So he will be motivated to play. The Chiefs will be motivated to play, but will it be enough? Because the Chiefs need to be able to show that they can lock down the number one receiver before I really put their defense in the discussion for with some of the top defenses out there.
All I would add is just the Chiefs got scorched by the Bengals twice last year in that defensive backfield, much more experienced defensive backfield then. I think you can make a case that athletically, in some ways, this defensive backfield is at least in the ballpark, if not slightly a little better athletically than what they put out there last year. But the experience factor is totally different. I do think, though, that you could feel like couldn't have gone much worse, especially than it did in the first game against the Bengals with the defensive backfield. And I feel like there's got to be some way that strategically they're much better equipped to cope with this than they were last year. Executing is always another matter, but that they're not going to be undressed the same way they were so much last year. We'll see how healthy Jamar Chase is too, by the way.
We will. I think he could have played last week. He did not, and they still got the W over Tennessee. Yeah, look, Burrow went for, I think it was 466 with 4 touchdowns and no picks in that regular season game, the victory over the Chiefs. I thought after that happened, and then the Bengals beat the Titans in the playoffs last year to give the Chiefs the home field for the AFC title game. Chiefs they've got the revenge factor. They've got all the emotional factors on their side. They will have studied how to play Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow and that Bengals passing attack, and the game was at Arrowhead now. And the Chiefs for a half took full advantage of all of that, and then the second half happened, and I'm still at a loss to describe why it happened in that AFC title game. So, hey, let's shift it quickly and talk about the running back situation. Melvin Gordon, now a member of the Chiefs. Man, I've covered a lot of games where he's had that he's pounded the Chiefs playing for the Chargers and the Broncos. He's had a couple 100-yard games against the Chiefs. And Jesse, just break down why he's with the Chiefs and what might be the playing options for him.
Yeah, and real quick, in fairness to the Chiefs, I think Chase went for 6 catches, 54 yards in the AFC Championship game, so they obviously had a different game plan for him. It just wasn't enough with some of the other weapons that the Bengals were able to hurt the Chiefs with. But they did have a different game plan in that one, and obviously was not the 266-yard performance or whatever that first game was for Chase when he went off against the Chiefs in the first one in Cincinnati. But Melvin Gordon, I think it's to be determined right now. I don't know. He's on the practice squad. We've heard some reports or whispers out there, potentially he could get activated, but I don't know. I mean, this is one of those Chiefs teams where you sort of, if nothing else, you want to do no harm, if you will. And Melvin Gordon coming in is a guy that lost his job in Denver and got released because he fumbled the ball. And it just doesn't seem like the Chiefs have too much stomach to be able to put somebody out there if they can't trust him. Now, this also is kind of one of those reclamation projects that Brett Veach seems to love, former first-round picks and those guys that are talented that he loves to bring in. But, on the practice squad now, Andy Reid basically gave the we'll see answer earlier this week, and Herbie asked him about what Melvin Gordon's role would be. But it might signify what we probably already knew about the situation, which is the Chiefs are not, or maybe Andy Reid is not completely in love with Ronald Jones. And so at some point, if there's an activation to be made or a switch to be made there, the Chiefs most likely will be releasing Ronald Jones. But as of now, it's depth. It's a guy on the practice squad. It's a guy who has a lot of accolades, a 2-time Pro Bowler. And so can he help the Chiefs? I don't know, but I do know if he does get in there and fumbles that he would have the shortest hook of all time, because the Chiefs right now are a team, as we've seen with the special teams in the punt return game, they need guys to basically just not screw up and give the ball back to Patrick Mahomes. And if you're not aiding that cause, then you should have a quick hook. And that's the same way with Melvin Gordon.
It's funny, if he were a young player, you would say, well, if he fumbles once, he'll get a second carry because Andy likes to put him back on the horse. But I think in this case, it's become such a part of his brand, if you will, right now that you've got to see that he won't do it. And I don't know how many chances you can give him that way. I should know this. I don't know how much before this year that was his issue or not. I just don't know if it was something that was always lurking before or just really came into this year. I suspect it was really whatever it had been. It was just so amplified this year again and again. I think 5 times, four or five, a couple in key situations. Yeah. So I don't know that as the old newspaper line goes, twice is a coincidence, 3 times is a trend story. That's beyond a trend. So let's see if it even comes into play.
Well, I like the differentiation there, Vahe. As I think about it, if you're a young player, a rookie or a youngster, and you fumble, you absolutely not only do you get another chance, you get the next chance. When Kareem Hunt fumbled to open that Patriots game back in 2017, the next time the Chiefs were on the field, the ball went to him. And Isaiah Pacheco earlier this year, Sky Moore after losing the fumble Sunday. Didn't the first play go back to Sky Moore after that?
First pass. I think there was a run before that. I want to say it happened in Indy too, though, that a pass went right to Sky Moore after that. Yeah. I think it's close to it.
And then I think about LaShawn McCoy fumbling the ball. I think it was against the Colts in a big spot during the Super Bowl year. And that was like the last we saw of LaShawn McCoy. If you're a veteran fumbling, you're, hasta la vista. You're done. So,
let's be honest about this too, Blair. Like, Melvin Gordon has the big name, and we've all heard of him, all those sorts of things. I mean, his greatest role for the Chiefs right now is doing what Ronald Jones did last game. 4 carries, 1 catch, back up to Isaiah Pacheco when Clyde Edwards-Helaire is still hurt. So that's the kind of guy who can't fumble. You know what I mean? Like, if you're giving Sky Moore more opportunities, okay, great. If you're giving Kareem Hunt more opportunities, well, he's your starter. You're not giving Melvin Gordon more opportunities. The dude has to hold on to the football. So that's sort of the upside for this play, if there is upside at all. Again, the Chiefs have lots of guys on their practice squad who you thought at some point might make a difference and haven't done anything or haven't even been promoted. So that's still maybe an occurrence that could happen with this. But again, we've all heard about him. He's going to be a name that we all talk about and hear about. But to me right now, if the switch is there, it's 1 for 1 for Ronald Jones, and he's kind of the backup, getting in a few snaps, a few carries. And if you are that guy playing a very specific role for a team, you cannot mess up what the other 52 guys are doing.
Who's the punt returner going forward? And should they even try to return punts?
Justin Watson, Vahe's guy, Justin Watson is the punt returner. He needs to do this, work on this more than he works on anything else because, we talked about it. Special teams right now for the Chiefs needs to be in not screw up mode. They need to get the ball back to Patrick Mahomes because the offense is really good. So, there's other years when the Chiefs had Alex Smith or Marty Schottenheimer where special teams really needed to be a factor and really needed to win them games. It doesn't need to win this team games. It needs to not lose this team games. And we saw the Indianapolis game, it lost them that game. This team needs to fair catch. They need to just take possession of the football, let the offense do the work, let them do the heavy lifting like they've done all year. And if that is what's going to happen, then that's a success. So, Justin Watson until Kadarius Toney comes back. When Toney comes back, you can maybe mess around with the punt returns a little bit more. But until then, I think I'm fair catching everything, and I'm telling Justin Watson to go do it.
I think Justin Watson showed us that you can get the crowd fired up with a fair catch. I don't know if he just subconsciously suddenly was taken with the crowd derisively cheering his catch, but the idea that he was whooping up the crowd because he caught the ball, I didn't get to talk to him about it, but it was pretty striking moment. I think I go back to Jesse's Hippocratic oath with first do no harm. I mean, you just gotta. Really, I think you could even make a scientific case, and I bet Jesse's equipped to do it, that all the math tells you ball to Mahomes every time. Just no matter what, nothing's more important than ball in Mahomes' hands. More important than 4 extra yards or 8 extra yards. More important maybe than a touchdown every 47 returns. I think you could probably make a case that you just always do that, other than inside the 5, and you assume it's going to go in the end zone.
Yeah, the statistical term, Vahe, is variance. You know what I mean? If you're the underdog, you want to shoot a bunch of threes. You want to play full court press. You want to do you want weird things to happen because you need weird things to happen to pull off an upset. The Chiefs are the opposite of that. If the Chiefs play their C game and the other team plays their C game, the Chiefs are going to beat 98% of the NFL. Maybe they won't beat the Bills. Maybe the Bills will be a game where we could, debate about this and one team is barely better than the other. But if you're the Chiefs, you don't want these swings. You want this. And fair catching is this. And special teams not returning kickoffs is this. So I think most times, again, you're going to bank on Mahomes. You're going to put on his back. You're going to believe that you're the better team. So you do not want the big ups and down turns. And that's what they've gotten from Sky Moore as a punt returner. And that's why you would have to figure they're not going to put him back there again this season.
All that. Go ahead.
Sorry. No, just before we go, I wanted to. I happened to see Rob Nassari's questions about Patrick and his interview on New Heights. I don't know if you guys got to see it. I saw a couple snippets, and two things that were kind of interesting. The way Patrick described telling the Chiefs that somebody might draft him if they don't move up to get him. Basically, Travis Kelce's conclusion was, "So you drafted yourself," which was hilarious. But also Patrick telling the story. I've not heard this story, and we've done a lot of pieces about Patrick's first meeting with Andy. Evidently, Matt Nagy fed Patrick a cheat sheet of the plays that were going to be discussed the next day, and that Patrick basically pulled an all-nighter. At least he was studying instead of just assuming the answers, but he had a little help. I don't think we get Matt Nagy today, but I think that'll be fun to ask Matt about. Or maybe we do get him today.
We do get Matt Nagy today, and that was an amazing story from Patrick. So basically, he gave him the test before the test the night before. So he gave him the Chiefs playbook. Patrick stays up all night and then comes into Andy and he's like, "Hey, what do you think about this play?" And Patrick, "Oh, I would do this and this and this and this." And so he aces the interview because Matt Nagy gave him the answers. So this will be great to ask Matt. But again, we give Brett Veach so much credit for his love of Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid so much credit, but maybe we need to give Matt Nagy more credit. He was the one that sort of was like, "Let me see if I can find a way to get this guy on my football team."
Yeah, I like the way. Go ahead, Blair.
I was going to say, but also give Patrick Mahomes credit for running with it. It's one thing to give somebody the cheat sheet. You gotta take advantage of it.
You got to write it down on your wrist.
Right.
But I like the way Patrick phrased that was something along the lines of that Matt kind of liked me. So he gave it to him. So, yeah, I bet Matt will be good on the topic.
All right, so we'll stay tuned for that later today. And look, we've run over, but always good conversation. That'll do it for today. Thanks to producer George Howard and to our SportsBeat KC staff of Monty Davis, Randy Mason, and Jeff Rosen. Tip of the cap to Vahe Gregorian, Jesse Newell, and Herbie Teope for sharing their insights. Thanks for listening, and we'll be back soon with another SportsBeat KC where we talk sports in Kansas City every day.